Shorty. Trumpet player as a kid, and by the time I was in high school I started getting interested in big band music and jazz, and I was trying to play in as many ensembles as I could, and I started at that point being interested in writing music for that medium, which I did. And you know, in those days, actually today too, I guess, you know, you'd have to write something, and then you'd have to write out all the parts for the players, which is quite an extraordinary amount of work. But I think that copying the parts, for a composer to copy his own parts, his or her own parts, I think that's one of the best educational things for a composer, because it forces a composer to put himself in the position of the player. And you know, when we're writing the parts, you have to make it easy to read, because if it's hard to read, you'll make mistakes and your music will sound bad. So I think every composer needs to do this, and I fear actually that the newer composers aren't doing that so much.
Flutes, oboes, clarinets, harp, pianos, and violins, violas, please. 208.
I was interested actually in scoring films, and so I started studying, and I also studied privately in addition to my college classes, and I was taking classes at a local, it's sort of a trade school, I guess. It was run by an arranger named Dick Grove, and he put together, he got a number of people who are working in the studios to teach at this at these workshops. I guess they call them music workshops, but they were like structured as a normal classroom kind of thing. So I was doing that. I was studying privately with my composition orchestration teacher, and going to UCLA, and actually I was studying also trumpet privately, in addition to the guy who was teaching trumpet at UCLA. So I pretty much dove in head first, and you know, it was difficult because, you know, my other classes suffered because I couldn't, you know, when you're practicing an instrument, you're writing pieces and writing out the parts. You know, it's not so easy to read the book for the class on Chinese Buddhism or something, you know. So it was a kind of a baptism by fire, I guess.
208.
Are you coming from a musical background, your family?
No.
Just the strings, please, 138. There's a 138, just the strings. Back to 129. I'd like everyone except trumpets, trombones, and percussion. 129. Everyone except trumpets, trombones, and percussion. 129. And
Bernard Herrmann scored the Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone, except for the main title. And I was pretty keenly aware of how that music affected those shows. But when I became interested in writing for jazz ensembles, I was also aware of the jazz composers who had made their impact on film. Composers like Shorty Rogers, for example. Elmer Bernstein, on some, you know, Elmer Bernstein actually had 4 phases, I think. You know, he had his jazz phase, his Americana phase, his comedy phase, and I forget which other else. But, so he was typecast 4 times, actually. But also Nelson Riddle, Billy May, composers like that had come from the jazz world. So it seemed to me that there was there's a lineage from jazz writing to film composition. When I was coming up, you know, Jerry Goldsmith was the the composer for films. And actually, John Williams as well. Jerry seemed to have risen up before Williams did, but by the time Star Wars came along, Williams had, of course, kind of eclipsed Jerry Goldsmith. But Goldsmith's scores were always, I think you could safely say that they were more adventurous than Williams, at least in terms of the style. I think Goldsmith's scores are unique in their originality, and he derived inspiration from different sources than certainly most composers up to his time. I've noticed actually that, I don't know if a lot of people recognize this, but Benjamin Britten has been a big influence on not only Jerry Goldsmith, but also John Williams and James Horner. And particularly the four C interludes from Peter Grimes. I think you can see a relationship between that and the Blue Max, which was one of Jerry Goldsmith's first scores, or first big scores. So, but when I was in college, and in addition to everything else I was doing, I was trying to absorb as much as I could from all the film composers who were working at that time. So I definitely, took note of not just the composers, then Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, Dave Grusin, Jerry Fielding, composers like that, but also the composers who had pioneered film music. In particular, Korngold, Steiner, Alfred Newman, who was really a superior composer. Miklos Rozsa, Dmitri Tiomkin, Franz Waxman, Victor Young, David Raxon, who I was privileged to attend his class at UCLA. A few years earlier, I had scored a film, and I became acquainted with the editor. His name was Zack Staenberg, and we became friends. And a few years later, he told me that he was starting work on this film, Bound. So he gave me the script to read, and I was quite astonished at the magnitude of the script. It was really one of the best scripts I'd ever read. So I was very eager to meet them. So it was Zack who made that arrangement for me. But I think it's useful to note that a big part of the success of Bound and The Matrix was Zack's participation, because I think he's the best editor in the business. And from a composer's standpoint, films either lay musically or they don't. And Zack's edits were always musical. There was always a rhythm, and it made sense. And editors nowadays often can't edit film unless they put some temporary music in there to edit too. And Zack doesn't do that. And of course, the origin, the editors who invented editing for a film, didn't do that. because they didn't have the technology to do it. And I think even if they did, they would consider the notion insulting. But Zack has an inner musicality that permeates his work, and I think that Bound and The Matrix really benefited from his input. The thing that was really remarkable about those two is that they really thought as one. You know, I mean, they literally could finish each other's sentences, and I was always amazed at that, and I don't know if I ever quite got used to it, because, you know, if I was, you know, having discussion with more than one person in the room and we came to an agreement, I would want to get a consensus with everybody else. You know, so, you know, I was talking with Larry about something, you know, and so we should do it this way, and then I asked Andy, do you agree? And he looked at me like I was crazy, you know. Of course I agree, you know, and I thought that was kind of astonishing. But in all the work that I've done with him, there has never been any kind of disagreement, or discord isn't the right word. It's always been linear. I mean, it's always been the same. They thought as one. And I've often thought that the key to their success was the partnership. They always had strong ideas. They always knew exactly what they wanted. They knew which scenes should have music, which scenes shouldn't, which scenes would have a song, and things like that. And it was always very carefully worked out from the very beginning. I had been wanting to score a film in that style for a long time, and so when I got a chance to work on The Matrix, it appeared to me as an opportunity and not as a you know, any kind of limitation. Measure 39. Just the woodwinds, measure 39. we spotted on December 10th of, that would be 1998. So I demoed every cue on the synthesizers. That was a very important aspect for the directors. And actually, they had cut all that music, the demos, into the film. And so when they previewed the film, that music was in it, which was fairly unique, and I think it remains fairly unique. But so that screening, the first screening was, I believe, January 15th or so. So I had completed the score by then. It was 75 minutes of music, so that's fairly quick. And then between January 15th and February 15th or so, middle of February, I was orchestrating. So, and by the end of February, we had recorded the whole score. It's organic for me, to orchestrate, and so I have a more organic relationship with the music when I've done that, and it's easier for me to conduct. And actually, I like to conduct my scores because when somebody else is conducting, I'm always saying, "Wait a minute, do it this way," and it doesn't make sense to me really to have somebody else and just tell him how to conduct. Actually, that was a woman named Beate Varkentine, ran a production company in Berlin. And I was acquainted with a friend of hers who approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing that. And I didn't have any objections. So, so I was involved from that standpoint, and so I made all my materials available to her company is called Philharmoniker, and she has a team of musicians who then assembled all the scores and formatted it for performance, in sequence. Whereas, the original form of the scores were, just for each particular scene, and we would record those and then cut them all together, which is essentially different from, presenting an orchestral concert, seamlessly from beginning to end. And so originally I think Warner Brothers was reluctant to allow it to go ahead. And I think that's mostly because, there's kind of a corporate structure there, and no one really wants to take responsibility for something that could go wrong. But the owners of the property, the Wachowskis, were amenable to the idea. So once they gave their go-ahead, then Warner Brothers fell right in line.
And after 33A is the intermission. So we'll have a break after that. So let's look at 33A. Here we go, 33A. And
I've done all of the U.S. concerts, and we've let's see, we've done it in Houston, Seattle, Atlanta, Chattanooga, Grand Rapids, St. Louis, and I'm forgetting something. But anyway, and I like it. So originally with Philharmonie, they made the stipulation that I would be conducting when Frank Schubel is not available. And Frank Schubel is not available for Stuttgart, which I'm very pleased about, and I've made it known that I want to be the first call conductor for it. Not to disparage Frank, because he's a wonderful conductor, but I want to do it. There's a pre-recorded track that's played back. So we play it in time with that track, which is the way, essentially the way I did it originally. As a score, I'd done the synthesizer parts in my home studio, and then we had them playing back when we were recording with the orchestra, and then after that we mixed it together into a 5.1, studio mix. So essentially those elements are being played back. The challenge is syncing it with the film. And I have to admit, it took me a few concerts before I really got it down. Now I know where the pitfalls are, where the booby traps are, so I can skirt around them.
Doesn't matter what I did you hear that? Hear what? Are you sure there's money coming? Yeah, of course I'm sure. I better go.
One thing that is a challenge is that when I recorded originally, I had a click track that I was listening to, but everyone in the orchestra also had a click track that they were listening to. So a matter of getting everyone to play a very fast tempo at exactly the same speed was solved, essentially. And having a click track that everyone was listening to a click meant that there's no discrepancy between a player who's sitting over there and a player who's sitting over there. So on a concert stage, when the orchestra does not have a headset, that becomes more problematic, because a player 20 meters over there can't necessarily hear a player 20 meters over there. And even if he can, the sound, as you know, travels slower than light, and so it's the sound when it gets over there is going to be late. So if he's trying to accommodate a sound that's late, the tempo is going to start to drift. Now, I'm the only one who has a click track, so it's my job to try to get everybody to play with the tempo. And so, and it's not a matter of, the player 20 meters over there is worse than the player over there. It's a matter of, he has to see me and play exactly the same. So the difficulty is sometimes I have to get the players in the back to play faster, literally, than the players in the front.
Lieutenant, you were given specific orders.
Hey, I'm just doing my job. You give me that Juris Mind diction crap, you can cram it up your ass.
The orders were for your protection.
How do you think we're gonna handle one girl? I sent 2 units. They're bringing her down now.
No, Lieutenant, your men are already dead.
On some concerts we have a live choir. Other concerts, I think it's typically for budgetary reasons. I don't choir actually, but some concerts do not have a choir. So we have it on, with the choir on the track that's played back. But I'm not sure why in Stuttgart we didn't use a choir, because I know that there are wonderful choirs in Stuttgart. But it may be a financial situation, I don't know. The Wachowskis wanted a choir, and I thought it was a good idea because from my standpoint I could see the choir as representing the humanity that was overcome by the machines, and there are just a few key places where that made sense. But so they wanted a choir, and I went to Warner Brothers and said they want a choir. And choirs at least in Los Angeles, are covered under the Screen Actors Guild agreement. So The Matrix was shot in Sydney, Australia, and the 4 SAG actors got SAG waivers. So essentially it was a non-SAG film, and Warner Brothers informed me that they had no intention of signing a SAG contract for the choir. So that meant that I had to go out of town to score the choir. So I went to Salt Lake City, and we hired members and former members of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, which is a wonderful group. And so it took me a long time to find the recordings. I was going through a closet actually fairly recently and found the original choir tracks, which we then incorporated. So if there isn't a choir on stage, you're hearing the choir that we recorded for the original Matrix. The last thing you want in an orchestra is 90 soloists. So they work very hard to get a uniform sound. They work very hard on their intonation. And so they come already with a fabulous ensemble. So all I have to do is tell them when to start and stop, really. And it's an absolute joy to work with a group like that. The end credits of The Matrix, they have a song by Rage Against the Machine that plays, if you're familiar with the film, Neo's on the phone in a phone booth, and he puts the phone down, and that's when that song begins. Now, when I was scoring it, they hadn't secured the clearance rights for that song yet. So, just in case they didn't get it, they asked me to cover it with orchestral music, which I did. And it turns out they did get the clearance. Of course, they put that music there. So the music I wrote for that ended up in the end credit after the song ended. So the film actually ends with that music. But we all thought that it would make more sense in an orchestral concert situation to have the orchestra play all the way in the last cue and into the end credits and all the way to the end of the credit sequence, because it seemed that it would be odd to play something and then this rock song happen and then play something after that. And I think it works quite a bit better as a concert experience.